Thank you for your desire to work with children and youth at Forest Hills Baptist Church. The privilege of serving carries immense joy, but it also carries great responsibility for safeguarding the children and youth that are in our care. This video covers some of the key points of our protection policies for youth and children, what we call the PPYC. The full policy is available from the church office on request. This video will cover 3 areas. First, we'll talk about the application process in order to work with children and youth. Second, we'll talk about the things that you need to keep in mind while you're serving with children and youth. And finally, we'll talk about what to do if you see abuse or suspect that abuse may be occurring in a child or youth's life. Everyone who wants to work with children or youth at Forest Hills must complete the application and go through a background check. If you'd like to work with children in 5th grade or under, you have to be at least 18 years of age. If you'd like to work with youth who are in 6th to 12th grade, you have to be at least 21 years of age. Everyone who applies to work with children or youth must have been a member or a regular attender of Forest Hills for at least 6 months. This time period allows us to get to know the applicant and better assess their suitability for work with youth or children. In some situations, we may grant a waiver to allow someone to apply who has attended for less than 6 months. The application has 2 parts. First, you must complete a training on the PPYC and our policies for youth and children. You can do this either in person or by video, as you're doing right now. Second, you must complete the application form and return it to the church. Please note that the application does require your Social Security number. We must have your Social Security number in order to complete your background check. However, we don't store this information on file at the church. As soon as we've completed your background check, we destroy all of the Social Security numbers. If you have concerns about giving us this information, please call the church office and we can talk about some secure ways for you to provide your Social Security number. Once you have completed a training and returned your application form, your part is done. We will use your application to conduct a background check, and the background check is completed by an independent and confidential contractor. A minister at Forest Hills will receive the results of your background check and compare it to the standards that have been set forth by the church. Whether your application is successful or unsuccessful, your application and the results of your background check are only accessible to a very small group of church leaders and are treated with complete confidentiality. In addition to your background check, we may take other steps to process your application. For example, we may contact some of the references that you've listed on your application. We may also interview you, either formally or informally, to determine your suitability for the work that you want to do. Finally, the application asks whether you yourself are a survivor of child abuse. Please know that if you're a victim of child abuse, this does not disqualify you for working with children and youth at Forest Hills. However, your experience and your recovery may impact your work with children and youth. If you're a survivor of child abuse, you must discuss your circumstances and your recovery with a minister during a confidential interview. We certainly don't need to know all the details of your experience, and we don't want you to disclose anything that you're uncomfortable disclosing. But we do just want to be sure that this is a good fit both for you and for the children and youth that will be in your care. When we have completed our checks, we will contact you in writing to tell you whether your application was successful or unsuccessful. If your application was accepted, you will be authorized to work with children and youth for a period of 5 years. After 5 years, you must reapply and attend a new training. If your application is approved, there are 5 things that you need to keep in mind when working with children and youth. First, if you see or suspect abuse of anyone under the age of 18, it is your responsibility to report that to the proper authorities. We'll cover this in more detail in the next section, but for now, just remember that you have a legal duty to report any abuse that you see or suspect. Second, when you're working with children or youth, there should always be 2 approved and non-related adults present to supervise. There should never be 1 adult alone with children or youth. In exceptional circumstances, a waiver may be requested to allow 1 adult who has been approved and passed a background check to work with 1 adult who has not yet passed the background check. A waiver may also be granted in some circumstances to allow 2 related and approved adults to work together with children and youth. But again, there should never be 1 adult alone with children or youth at any time. Third, adults should be in plain sight with a child or youth whenever possible. Adults should not be in a closet or other non-visible location with a child or youth. If a child needs assistance in a bathroom or another location that is not visible, 2 adults should always be present to supervise. Fourth, physical contact should always be positive and appropriate. Hugs and other forms of physical affection are important for a child's development, and generally, they're acceptable in our church setting. Any kind of physical contact should be appropriate to the age of a child or a youth. So what's appropriate with the child may not be appropriate with the youth. Touching should always be initiated by the child or youth and based on the child or youth's need. Touching should never be based on an adult's emotional need. Touching and physical contact should always be done in the presence of another adult worker so that it's not misunderstood or misperceived. All touch and all physical affection should avoid even the appearance of wrongdoing. It's also important that touch be positive and that you not use any spanking or physical punishment on children or youth in your care.
Fifth, your verbal communication with children and youth must be positive. You should refrain from inappropriate, profane, or demeaning communication. Use language that conveys love and respect and acceptance for the child or the teen. Remember, your words have the potential to do tremendous good or tremendous harm to the minor who is in your care.
If you have reason to suspect that a minor has been abused, you have a legal responsibility to report that to the proper authorities. All reports must be taken seriously, and each person who suspects abuse is individually responsible for reporting that abuse to the Wake County Department of Social Services. If you suspect abuse, or if you hear a report of abuse, you should remember 5 key things. First, do not do any investigation of the abuse yourself. Allow the authorities to do all investigations. If you hear a report of abuse, simply provide an open and accepting space for the victim to provide their report. Only ask questions to clarify basic facts if you don't understand what the person is saying. Second, write down as many of the details as you can as soon as possible. Try not to make notes while the person is speaking. Instead, give that person your full attention. And as soon as the report is finished, write down all the details that you can remember. Third, you are responsible for contacting the Wake County Department of Social Services as prescribed in North Carolina law. Fourth, if the abuse happened on church property, during a church program, or if either the alleged abuser or the alleged victim are members of Forest Hills, please report that abuse to either the senior pastor or an associate pastor. If you need assistance reporting the abuse to the Department of Social Services, we'll be happy to help you. However, if the senior pastor or an associate minister are unavailable or can't be reached in a timely manner, you are still required to report the abuse yourself as soon as possible. Unless requested to do so by law enforcement, please do not discuss the alleged abuse with anyone other than the Department of Social Services or a ministry staff member. Fifth, if you suspect that a child or youth is in immediate risk or in immediate danger, you must use your best judgment on how to keep that child or youth safe. You may need to call 911 and request immediate assistance from law enforcement. As a church, Forest Hills will take each report seriously. We will support individuals who see or suspect abuse and assist them in reporting that to the authorities if necessary. We will proactively cooperate with law enforcement authorities and social service agencies, and we will not blame the victim. We will also handle allegations with respect to people's privacy and confidentiality. Forest Hills will also provide Christian support, as appropriate, for alleged offenders, alleged victims, and their families. Finally, You may see a violation of the PPYC and our policies, which may not rise to the level of child abuse. For example, you might see another worker using language around children that might be questionable. If you see a violation of the PPYC policies, you should report that to us. Please make written notes as soon as you can to document what you saw, where you saw it, and when, and report that to a minister. Ministry staff are responsible for investigating this and all follow-up to the situation. Possible responses might range from reminding the person about the PPYC and the policies that we have to contacting law enforcement. A full copy of the protection policies for youth and children can be found in the church office. If you have any questions about those policies or anything else that you've seen in this video, please contact the office. Thank you again for your desire to work with children and youth at Forest Hills.